Now I have the honor of introducing our keynote speaker, Mr. Doug Welsh. He is a longtime friend and a big supporter of Café de Costa Rica. Doug is the Senior Vice President of Coffee, Sustainability, R&D at Pete's Coffee, the Berkeley, California specialty coffee pioneer. In his 30-year pursuit of coffee excellence, he is most bullish on collaborative initiatives, working with innovators like Enveritas and TechnoServe to build a better coffee world. He is a founding advisor of the UC Davis Coffee Center, former chair of the World Coffee Research, and today leads Pete's Sourcing with Impact program. So please join me in welcoming Doug.
Good job. Thank you, Arnoldo. ¿Va bien? ¿Otra vez? Test, test. ¿Ya? ¿No? Hello? Hello? Can you guys hear me? Yeah? Yeah? No? Yeah. Should we use the alto? Okay, I'll stay here. I was going to roam like a caged cat, but instead I'll stand here. Sorry for the delay. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Arnoldo, for the kind invitation. Thank you, Noelia, as always, for putting it all together. Thank you mostly for the producers of Costa Rica, for all the great coffee over all the years. Thank you, friends. Thank you, colleagues. Muy buenos días. I want a divorce. I'm very sorry to tell you this. I know some of you, we just got started. It's the first speech of the first day. Some of you haven't even met me yet. And still, I think it would be best if we didn't see each other anymore. I'm sorry. I hope this makes you feel better. It's not you. It's me. Let's see how that worked out for George in Seinfeld.
I'm sorry, George.
But I don't understand. Things were going so great. What happened? Something must have happened.
It's not you. It's me.
You're giving me the it's not you, it's me routine? I invented it's not you, it's me. Nobody tells me it's them, not me. If it's anybody, it's me.
All right. George, it's you.
You're damn right it's me.
Look, I was just trying to,
I know what you were trying to do. Nobody does it better than me.
Well, I'm sure you do it very well.
Yes, well, unfortunately, you'll never get the chance to find out.
Okay, so as usual with George, it worked out not well. Because George is a disingenuous person. But also, this excuse, it's not you, it's me, is really, it's a bit of a dodge, right? And we do it because we are afraid that the truth might be painful, right, in breaking up in a relationship. But I think when it comes to responsible sourcing, which is the topic today, the truth is that the truth will set us free. The more truth we have in these systems, the better off we'll be. So, have I ever complained about certifications? Personally, I invented complaining about certifications and verifications, especially if it was somebody else's system, cafe practices or fair trade or AAA, somebody else's system of responsible sourcing. I had a lot of complaints. But the more I've complained about it, the older I've gotten, and the deeper I've gotten into evolving our own system, the more I realize how non-productive that complaining has been. And so, actually, what I would urge today is that the opposite, is that we not break up with any of our systems. But I do think it is important that we evolve them. I do think it is critical that we upgrade our systems. If you think about it in a way, fair trade being about 40 years old, doing an amazing job of raising awareness in our industry, there have not been a lot of significant upgrades in our certification and verification systems. So I would just ask you, would you buy a computer that had software that had not been significantly upgraded in 40 years? We need some upgrades. The good news is that there has been a lot of innovation, and that has been seen through a lot of different programs, not just in Veritas, not just Cafe Practices, not just Fair Trade, Rainforest Alliance. Everyone is evolving. I think it's important that we take stock of where we are so that we can move on together. And in the end, what I'm saying is, it's that we should do maybe a little couples therapy, right? A little marriage counseling will do us some good. We should not break up, but we should upgrade. All right. As we do this, there are definitely 3 things we do not want to do. Here's what we're not going to do. We're not going to leave it to the farmer. We've done that for too long. Letting the farmer do everything is not going to work. It's not only not fair, it's not only not responsible, but it is not effective. The farmer does not have the resources to solve all of our ESG problems as roasters and retailers. So the first thing, referencing this very old Paul Simon song, is that we're not going to leave it to the farmer. 50 ways to leave it to the farmer. Also, we should not charge the farmer. So an upgrade that we all need to follow is, as in the Veritas system that I'll introduce to you shortly, there are no fees for the farmer to be inspected, go through an audit. Pete pays those fees happily so that we take our share and so that we get good data and so that we don't take too much of the farmer's time as well is a really important part of that. And the third element that I think we really need to leave behind is I want to outlaw, no more outlawing things, no more outlawing issues. I have zero tolerance for zero tolerance. So in the certification systems of the past, I think the idea anyway to the consumer is behind this seal there are no issues. It is issue-free, and we have guaranteed that for you. And I think that idea is impossible on its face. And I think anyone who works at Origin, certainly lives at Origin, knows that's not the case. But also we know that in consuming countries, nothing is perfect. Minimum wage laws are extremely controversial and difficult in the United States, just as they are here. It's not different. There are issues. Knowing the issues and addressing them is the key. So let's outlaw making, I think the idea that we forbid something in Bonn or Berkeley where I live, and then that means that it will not be an issue anymore, just doesn't really work. So let's leave that one behind. Okay, if someone can tell me, when is this climate change thing that I've been hearing about, when is that coming? I can't remember. Is it still on its way? I think this slide pretty clearly illustrates what you've been seeing in your own lives. Remember the quaint times when we used to say, we need a better world to leave to our grandchildren. And then it evolved to, well, we need to leave a better world to our kids. And now it's here. We're living in this world. These are current photographs, right? Down in the left corner, you see the news from the Panama Canal that just, for most of us, broke last week, that there isn't sufficient water to float more than 35 vessels a day through the Panama Canal. So literally, climate change is upon us. And they're going to reduce that probably to 18 vessels a day. That will be so much more disruptive than that one vessel stuck in the Suez Canal. And it's here and it's now. Wildfires in California, in Canada, flooding, freezing in Texas, everywhere. The farmer is no longer the only person who is aware, acutely aware, that climate change is here. And the funny thing is that it brings us a peculiar relief. And this is strange to say, but because it's so present in all of our lives every day, we can stop having this debate about whether it's human-caused. Because it simply doesn't matter anymore. What we know for certain is that the solutions will be collaborative and human. Only humans will be able to get together and fix this problem. That's for sure. So we can stop worrying about whether it's caused by human behavior or not. It was. But if it's not, it doesn't matter. We have to fix it together. That's clear. Okay, here's another thing we've kind of been doing. Finally, he's talking about football and not relationships. Such a relief to half of the audience. Who won? Who won at this game? If the game is sustainability, it really doesn't matter. It's who won? Was it Saprissa? Was it Halahuela? In the end, if the game is sustainability, sustainability is that football still exists. Sustainability is that coffee will still be with us. That's sustainability, so that we can play again tomorrow and the next day. And by the way, when you're working on all your programs and updating your programs, there's a beneficiary that we should not forget. So we're thinking about the farmer all the time. We're thinking about the environment. But there's one other character, and her name is Coffea. Don't forget the plant itself. So this is why we have to get together to join collaborative institutions like World Coffee Research, because the plant itself must survive for our business to survive. That's the other player in our little relationship. Don't forget the kids, the plants. Without them, there's nothing. And then finally, I would say, look at that field, imagine it as a coffee farm, and remember that there are very few exclusive supply chains. So if that represents a farm, I'm buying from it, you're buying from it, many people, there are very few singular sources, so why would we have a sort of branded singular approach to sustainability on that farm? You are not uniquely responsible for all of the production of Cope Tarasu, Cope Victoria. You're responsible for the portion that you buy. And flipping that around, if we were to create positive impact programs, you're only responsible to contribute to that extent. And it becomes a relief to understand that you don't have to fix everything everywhere in every industry and in every country, but you are responsible in your own supply chain. So let's get out of putting our names on sustainability programs. It's not moving impact forward. Competing on sustainability is not a good idea. And in fact, if you want to own sustainability, you go ahead. I'll be right behind you. All right, so who is this guy up here? I have to realize that many of you are friends and colleagues, suppliers of Pete's. Many of you don't know who Pete's is. It was started by this guy, Alfred Peet. He was a Dutchman, and it's very curious that he's completely unknown in the Netherlands. Nobody has heard of Mr. Peet, and the main reason is that he started his business in California in 1966. And really, he had a pretty simple dual innovation. He really only had two kind of innovations, but they were revolutionary. And one was craft roasting, so you see him there with the roaster, and his idea of sensory roasting going back to his uncles and his grandfather's tradition of roasting by the senses with a high degree of skill and developing flavor and paying really close attention to that. So he was really one of the founders of craft roasting. And the other was just better ingredients. So it's a pretty simple formula. It's not so easy to do, but it's a simple idea. And his idea was that no matter how expensive or rare a coffee is, or if it's in a blend or a single origin, they should all be good. His idea was that they should all be of a very high quality, and I think that's sort of the foundational idea of specialty coffee. All of it is good. And the only reason I mention that here is that it's also our model for sustainability, and not just ours at Pete's, but for many of you in the room, there has been a change that we should acknowledge, which is we've moved from having sustainability be a niche business, a small part of your menu where there are some logos, and then behind that there are some other coffees that you don't talk so much about and don't know so much about that are in your blends. So Mr. Pete's concept was there's no such thing as a blender. I'll tell you a little side story about Mr. Pete that will give you the full context. So Pete's was actually the first company to import geisha. And when it came off the Peterson's farm, at that time the farm was called Jaramillo, and we were buying all the production. So when they separated out the geisha from the top of the farm and they exported it, they just threw it in the container. They called us up, they said, yeah, we have this, it's tasting really good, it's really different, should we include it in the shipment? We said, yeah, I guess so. And there's 14 bags of geisha that turned out to be historic. At the time, Mr. Pete was still with us, and so we sent him a sample. And he tasted the coffee, and we had a phone call the next day, and he called up and he said, it's a very interesting blend, it has great aromatics. I think I could make a great blend with it. So this is a coffee that we now, routinely is sold for hundreds of dollars a pound. But the point is that we need sustainability and quality across our entire book, our entire supply of coffee. This is just a little bit of advertisement, but it illustrates something as well. So on the lower left, you see our cupping room, and I started to think, this is something that you could never outsource, right? You wouldn't pay someone else to evaluate the coffee that you purchase for roasting. And in a funny way, it's also true of responsible sourcing. And I'm very grateful to Fair Trade initially and Rainforest Alliance afterwards and many other programs that have followed, because you really did try. You tried to become the consciousness or the conscience of this industry, and I thank you for that. But in the end, I think it was never really going to be possible, because it's not something you can outsource. Either you have a responsibility or you do not. And that's why I'm urging all of us to move forward together on parallel tracks to create the impact that we all desire. Because the other thing that's interesting about all of the systems is that they all have the same goals. They track virtually all the same standards, and they want the same outcomes. And these outcomes have really been decided by all of us, not just in this room and not just in the coffee industry, but by society at large, right? No child labor, no dangerous chemicals. These are things that everyone knows and are desirable and everybody wants. So all the systems are coming from the same place. So there must be some synergies in getting there. Okay, this is the first quiz of the morning. It's a very simple quiz. Do you think there are more blocks in the Great Pyramid at Giza or more coffee farmers in the world? Which one? It doesn't really matter. It's a big win for coffee farmers. There are only 2.3 million blocks in the pyramid, and there are 12.5 million coffee farmers. And the point I want to make is about the transition we have made in sustainability and sourcing systems from anecdotal to data-driven. There was a time, and it was a very long time, and it's been going on for a very long time, in fact, my whole career in coffee, where we would get up at forums like this and just sort of throw out, oh yeah, and then the farmers, there's 25 million farmers. And that number was just repeated anecdotally. It hadn't been researched. There was no footnote that really gave us good data. And thanks to Inveritas, who did the first recent thorough study of actually how many farmers there are, is really the base for all of our programs to understand how much work is there to do, right? So it's really important to have good data. I think this pyramid also has kind of another function for me symbolically. So if you think about it, those 12.5 million farmers, most of them, a good 10 million of them, are 2 hectares or less. So they sort of represent that whole base up to the part where you see the cladding on the top and the kind of shiny part on the top, most farmers in the world are relatively small, farming small plots, right? And the key to that is not just size. It's also that many of them, most of them, are unaffiliated. They're not members of the co-op, or they are transitional members of the co-op, in and out of the co-op, or they're not members of a co-op at all, which means that they don't have any ag extension services, they live in the most remote areas, they have the fewest resources, but most of all, in terms of responsible sourcing systems, they are unknown, they are unseen. And that is the problem that we really needed to solve in our supply chain, and our supply chain looks very much like the supply chains of many of you in the room. Okay, so here it is. I'd like to introduce you to Anonymous, in Veritas. Nick Kirby, would you raise your hand? Thank you. So there is actually a human working for Veritas. They're not invisible, they're not anonymous. It's a real thing, it's a real organization. It's how many people now? 80 plus the enumerators. Many, many people doing the surveys on the ground. And Veritas is a real organization that grew out of TechnoServe. Its mission is the same as your mission, is to eradicate poverty in the coffee business. Everybody wants the same thing. What are some of the important upgrades in version 2.0? It's actually probably more like version 8.0, but let's just keep it simple. The elements are, and actually, I shouldn't tease Nick too much because I'm coming to see their modesty as a virtue. Because if you look at our older systems, a lot of money is spent on marketing. So congratulations in Veritas for being the only organization in coffee that maybe has more lame public relations than Pete's Coffee itself. Well done. But it's a virtue in the sense that funds are not going to persuading college kids or local, local churches or anybody else to buy this or that brand of certified or verified coffee. That takes a lot of money and effort, and any money and effort that's spent in the consuming world creating demand is not spent on the ground where it's needed. So I'm going to stop teasing you about being invisible and talk about one of the major innovations, which is geospatial, which is using satellite imagery to start with. And what Veritas does with that imagery is they create a grid, starting with every 3 meter by 3 meter square in the coffee park all around the world is mapped. So we literally have taken every coffee farm in every origin, and we know where every coffee tree is from space. And we put that in a grid. Why is the grid important? Because if you want good data out of a region, if you're going to Santa Maria or a small area, and you want a true sample, you need to randomly drop pins, and then you need to visit those exact spots to get a good read on what's going on there. You can't go to your buddy's farm. You can't go to the nearest farm. You can't sit in your Toyota eating rosti pollo and fill out the form without visiting at all, although that could happen. But that will not produce good data. So you need to create this grid. And actually, another thing, in addition to randomization that's really, really important, is resolution. So we need sufficient resolution that machine learning can distinguish what a coffee tree looks like and distinguish it from the banana tree next to it, from the shade, from other crops. So we really need the machines to do the work for us here in finding all the coffee trees. And then we can do this next thing. It has to be combined with ground truth. So it's not enough to identify everything from space. You have to verify it on the ground. And this is the biggest part of Veritas's team, many, many enumerators, as we call them. So in Pete's supply chain alone, that's 25,000 individual farm interviews every year, in season, in harvest, in real time, and it looks like this. So that enumerator is going to that exact spot where we dropped the pin and interviewing who's ever there. He doesn't know who's there, he or she doesn't know who's there until they get there. And then they do a short interview, they take a picture, we can track the cell phone to ensure that they went to that spot. It's uploaded in real time, and we are out of the farmer's hair in 30 minutes or so. And honestly, the response to most of the interviews has been very positive, because the farmers are mostly farmers who have never been interviewed before, and their response typically is, I didn't know anyone was interested in what my challenges are, what type of fertilizer I'm using, what the yields look like. So it's been a very positive experience, but ground truth is a really critical part of it. All right, what are the results? The good news is they are varied. And every single farm, as you can imagine, has slightly different issues. That's a good thing for us, because what it means is when we get all the data back, we're going to see that there's a lot of things that we don't have to do once again. So what the data shows is that deforestation is not an issue in many places that coffee is grown, that there is a very, very low risk of child labor in many places, most places where coffee is grown. So don't create a child labor reduction or ban chemicals if they're not at issue in that place. You don't have to create a program. It starts to bring down your responsibility. It's very scary to think when, and these are why we don't talk about issues like child labor in public forums like this. It seems too scary, but probably it's because the problem is too big. If you think about it generally, it is too frightening. It is too big, it is too scary. But when you think about your portion of it, which you can now calculate, it suddenly becomes more manageable, or looking a lot more manageable. So I'm going to talk about one of the impact programs in response to the data that we see, but I want to be really careful before I do this, because I want to talk about child labor, something that we don't typically do publicly. And I want to do that here in Costa Rica. So one of the reasons we don't do that in the past is you don't want to insult or implicate your host country. And another thing you don't want to do is implicate your host producer, which in this case is Cope Tarasu. And we're not doing that. It's important to recognize that what the data brings back to us is indications of risk. It doesn't tell us that child labor is rife in Tarasu. It tells us that there is risk that we should address. And so here's just a little video on the program, a little bit of advertisement.
This is a daycare center in the heart of the Tarazu coffee-growing region of Costa Rica. It's a Casa de la Alegría, which means house of joy. Every year, migrant workers across Costa Rica travel by any means possible to work the coffee harvest. Many are parents.
Iniciamos en el 2018 con la Casa de la Alegría en la finca de la cooperativa. Todos los años abrimos 5 casas por año. Este año tenemos casas con 600 niños aproximadamente.
The casas come to life during harvest season with support from the Costa Rican government, UNICEF, nonprofits, and Pete's Coffee.
We are investing in the coffee farming communities. We're acting where it's needed most to support farmers in the communities where we source our coffee.
It's afternoon snack time. And for the families and farmers whose work makes coffee possible, what is finally being served up is a measure of support.
I really like this last frame, which is evidently comes from Tarazu de Antigua, Guatemala. But everything can't be perfect, especially in the marketing department. Okay, so a lot of things to notice here. One of it's not Pete's program. We certainly didn't invent it. We're certainly not the first. We're certainly not the only people in this room to be funding Casas de Alegría, even in Tarasu or with Cope Tarasu. So it's not an owned program, it's a collaborative program. It's open and we need more. And another thing to point out about it is that it is only one theory of change. So there is actually a lot of things we can do about child labor, and some of it is just informational. The situation is different in every coffee producing area. So in this area, we are talking about migrant workers, people who come across a border. And they are very likely, and they do bring their families with them. In other places, we might be talking about small farmers where all of the labor is family and local. And it's a very different situation. So, and there are other theories of change. So it might be just an awareness campaign. You'd be surprised. Or maybe you wouldn't be surprised to learn that a lot of people living in remote areas don't understand the concern that you have in the same way. In Papua New Guinea, we have a pilot program to provide clean water in schools, purified water at low cost in schools, because it turned out from the research to be one of the barriers for parents leaving their children there because they were getting sick, because they didn't have clean water or they didn't have a latrine. These are simple interventions. And moreover, I think the most critical thing to remember about them is that it's only 2 months of the year. Child labor is an issue during the harvest. In most places, it is not an issue at all, those other 10 months. And so it raises the question, could we, working collaboratively, forgetting about trying to own sustainability and own our own programs, could we together do this? Well, another quiz before we do that. So this is the last quiz. This is the ending quiz. How many of you do business in Tarasu? And if you put your hand up, keep your hand up as I keep going. So you do business in Tarasu. You have something to do with coffee production in Tarasu. Okay, how many of you have ever had a cup of coffee? Okay. How many of you are human beings with a caring, beating heart? Okay. So it's everyone, and that's the point. Like, working collaboratively, could we meaningfully address child labor just during the harvest season, just in the supply chain that we are responsible for? Yes, we can. Si se puede. Or another way of saying it, it is us. Thank you.